Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us, without further ado, what do you do in aerospace industry and space economy at the moment?
Yeah, I'm actually third generation aerospace technically. My grandfather was aerospace professor at the Polish Air Force. My mother's Lady Rocket, so some people might know her in the space economy, and we have the Lady Rocket Foundation together. And I am the co-founder and CEO of Copernic Space, which is a blockchain-based platform that enables access and acquisition of space assets, whether that's payload space, satellite data licenses, or even direct financing and providing liquidity to space ventures and companies.
So before you actually entered the space, I mean, the platform that you're building, what was the state of the industry at that time, and how do you see it right now, and how your platform is contributing to solve those issues?
Yeah, well, back to the generational thing, the whole idea behind this democratization of space assets, the first writings I found of it were actually my grandfather's. So he really planted that seed. The conception around Copernic Space happened about 6 years ago, right? Which this problem existed. The two main problems we're solving, which we view as the largest problems in the space economy, existed then as well. But blockchain technology itself wasn't at a mature enough place yet to execute what we wanted to do from a product platform end. The second part, even more importantly, was kind of the mentality, psychology, perspective of the space economy and its participants definitely wasn't there yet. Mm-hmm. But what we're seeing, and this year is just the beginning of it, is really this aspect of the space economy building. As of right now, the space economy is extremely dominated by a few governments, a few major corporations whose revenue base is mainly based off those governments, right? And it's actually, obviously has huge benefits for some entities, especially these companies that are getting these contracts. But it has, in my viewpoint, really stymied the growth of the space economy in an organic sense. And it totally blocks off the general market, whether businesses or individuals, from participating in the space economy. So this year is the beginning year where the space economy becomes opened up to a wider class of businesses and individuals. And whether it's, companies like us doing it through some of our early initiatives, or even what we saw with Space Force doing last week or the week before around tokenizing and making commercially available to the public what we call at Copernic Space alternative space assets. Mm-hmm. So I have loads of companies that come to me and they say, hey, how can you help us monetize what we call alternative space assets? So these are these,
And what are those? And
yeah, go ahead.
How do you define the alternative space assets? What is?
Yeah, so these are things that are not directly tied to product, service, asset, or financing of a space company. So this would be, for example, artwork. This could be, for example, I'm going to create an NFT of the first screw of a rocket that went into space, and someone can buy that as a collectible. We're doing it this past week with an initiative, Copernic Space, Lady Rocket Foundation, and Saving the Survivors, which is a well-known organization in South Africa that fights poaching and saves endangered animals there, especially rhinos. So we teamed up and we created the satellite rhino NFT, which we've made available to the public, right? To show how can space-related projects, ventures, initiatives provide liquidity or financing to themselves by monetizing these alternative space assets. In this case, it's moving artwork related towards rhinos and satellites, and the funds go towards, among other things, improving and building solutions to provide better satellite data and imagery towards organizations like Saving the Survivors. Right. So alternative space assets is very broad. to me, it's pretty much anything that can be commercialized around space that isn't the actual product, service, or asset itself, right? Like a piece of gold from an asteroid. That would be a space asset that we would tokenize and they'll sell on Earth digitally. They don't have to hold the piece of gold itself. Just how most people holding any large amount of gold today are doing so digitally. It's custodial.
And what would you do with the physical gold if you sell the digital gold?
That's up to the company. So we're not quote unquote the asset provider. We are the facility. We are the eBay of retail. We're that for space. So we're the facilitator between market participants.
You're the platform, and tell us more about the platform itself, the features, how
Sure.
it works, and also like how do you think blockchain can revolutionize this industry?
Yeah, great. So back to the two problems. So we see the two major problems of space economy being you have a $400 billion plus market. We actually think it's actually already $1 trillion. It's just there's no actual market that facilitates and connects the transfer of assets and value. Right? It's extremely segmented, very old processes that hasn't even hit Web 2.0 sort of e-commerce-y, let alone Web 3.0. The other aspect where blockchain really comes in, I like the example, some of our first commercial cases. So we're going to do the first tokenized public sales payload space. This is for a rover going to the moon next year. So what we're going to be doing with that is you can take, for example, a kilo. So they will buy a kilo off of it. What they're actually getting is an NFT. They don't need to know it's an NFT. They don't know it. Within it, it's embedded all their rights, etc. What they can then do with that, though, is they can chop that up, make it divisible, and let's say create 100-gram portions of it and resell that, right? So blockchain has not only provided this way to directly in a peer-to-peer sense transfer and transact value and related rights and intellectual property, but has de facto created the first ever true secondary market for space assets directly just based off its natural functions. The holy grail, kind of one of the applications we have on the market that we're focused on long term, is solving the satellite data problem. Space Force, DoD came out today, said they're trying to create a marketplace for satellite data. How we're viewing satellite data is that we will take, whether it's supply or demand, our marketplace is segmented supply and demand. Demand is the holy grail, which is I am agriculture company, I am logistics company. I come on Copernic Space, I put in a request. This is what I need, right? That request hits our supplier pool of great satellite data providers. Someone fulfills that offer. What they're doing there is actually they're taking a data set, whether it's live or static. A lot of it sits on AWS, for example, in the space industry. And they're creating a license out of that, an offer. Within that, they can embed all these rights, these metadatas. This is valid for a year. They can access this data for a year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when this entity acquires the license for the satellite data, once again, they're acquiring an NFT. They don't know it. They don't need to know it, but they're reaping all the benefits of what NFTs provide. In that case, they are able to directly acquire with all the rights preloaded and access that data set directly on AWS with secure login, no secondary logins, username, etc. It's one of one, it's unique, it's filled with all the rights that they have to access it, and they access it. So in one place, you can engage, acquire, access, and manage all of your space assets in one place, whether it's satellite data or your payload space. So once again, we view it already as a $1 trillion industry. It's just there's no place that's facilitating this engagement and this transfer of value. Right. So within about 4 to 6 months, you should see that first commercial case with the payload space coming out. And then the second half of the platform is called the Space Pool. And this is us solving, especially a struggle for people like me, the entrepreneurs, the business builders in the space industry, is there's pretty much no liquidity. Even guys like Musk, right now, SpaceX is selling shares. Why is it doing that? And why is he doing that so often? It's not just to raise up the valuation. That's because there's liquidity needs that are met. In the case of that, why can't a space company with in this case, hundreds of millions of dollars in contracted revenue be able to leverage that to pull out liquidity very fast at acceptable terms, interest rates out of the market, and then put it back, right? On the flip side, early stage, but all space ventures, but early stage especially, have pretty much nowhere to go. Their place is you either go for the government grants, which is thousands of rats fighting for the same piece of cheese, or they go to VC. Maybe they're lucky and they find a crazy angel investor, but then they go to VCs. And as somebody who's spent 14 years in the startup space around, progressive tech, both successfully and with failures, the VC model and mandates are not set for the space economy at all whatsoever. So these guys are stuck in kind of a quagmire. And because of my background, my expertise and experience around 7-8 years around the crypto space and the regulatory aspect of crypto space, the space pool will provide a tokenized financing model for both early stage non-revenue space companies that allows the global public to finance it, as well as a liquidity pool strictly for contracted space companies to leverage their contracted revenue to pull out that liquidity real quick, and then put back that liquidity into the pool with the interest that goes to the liquidity providers, right? In our viewpoint, that is the fuel that's going to push the space economy forward, because you can take all the VCs, all the governments, put them together, focus it. It's not enough to finance all that's needed in the space economy. And what we've seen since 2017 with the ICO boom, when general individuals around the world were out funding blockchain projects versus VCs for 2 years, that happened. And what we saw this past year with GME and some of these AMC stock situations is that if the public, collectivizes its capital, it will eat the biggest hedge fund in the world easy.
Exactly.
So we really want to capture that.
Yeah, the retail investor. So I wanted to ask you exactly. So your model for the early seed, perhaps financing for companies. So what are the requirements for those companies? They have to get on your platform. Is there kind of like a how do you verify? How do you vet? Is there a vetting process? What are the criteria? And it's exactly like the ICO. Kind of
yeah, that's a very good question. So it's very important for everyone to know that we're not like some crypto guys that are just trying to shove crypto abstractly into space. We want to provide valid, true solutions. With this platform, it's distributed, decentralized. We're non-custodial around data, non-intermediary around transactions. But to your question, we control the entry points. So first KYC process, right, which is pretty standard corporate KYC. Then it's something called KYM, which means know your material. So this is an industry, hopefully what will become an industry standard, which we're applying in the platform. So whether it's the marketplace or the space pool, in the marketplace, we need to verify and validate whether that entity or company has the rights and capability to commercialize that. We want to do it very fast. Give us the paperwork. Let's check it over. Okay, this is legit. Let's check with Companies House, balance it against the KYC. And the space pool, more towards your question, is there will be a process of verifying the legitimacy of the project. But we want to take, and with the liquidity pool thing for the contracted space companies, a good example is kind of Pipe. If you look at pipe.com, they're not really democratizing it. It's for institutional type investors mainly. But what we will do similar to them is bring your contracted revenue, bring your contracts with the contracted revenue. Let us verify that and then confirm that and use that as the leverage against it. So each one has a little bit of different standard or process of verification. But I spent years in the regulatory space. I spent years fighting crypto scams as a founder of CoinFirm. So it's very serious for me that the quality of ventures and assets on this platform are legitimate, right? But at the same time, I'm not going to be here and play a venture capitalist. That's for the public to decide.
Okay.
If the public wants to risk their money, you know, that's them.
And yeah, exactly. So then how does the regulatory environment would look like? Is it, are there any risks for like allowing those companies to be on your platform in order to fundraise? Or is it just kind of like a, since crypto is not being regulated, obviously the platform is kind of like decentralized. So what are also the risks around the regulation?
So with the liquidity pool, it all depends on the contracts that those companies have. We're going to be providing them fiat if they want. They don't have to accept crypto. So we're not going to unnecessarily expose space companies to any crypto element. It's very important to, you know, to reinforce that, yes, everything is going to be on blockchain rails, but you do not have to use crypto, right? You can put dollars in, we stablecoin it, move it along the rails. The struggle to what you're asking about is going to be more on this direct tokenized financing model, so more of that ICO-ish model. In the beginning, we're launching with what we call Kudos for now, which is us gamifying non-interest or charitable giving, right? So these are organizations like Lady Rocket Foundation, or for example, Spaceborne United, which does R&D for human reproduction in space. Right? These are these things, or NASA is our holy grail around that, which is if NASA has budget shortfalls, let the American public finance it as opposed to leaving it in the hands of Congress, right? And what do they get back? They get back. Sorry, go ahead.
Or the taxpayers' money.
Right. But let the taxpayer, if the in the 60s,
just decide, you know, they just can decide. Like me, I'm a taxpayer, I don't want to pay, for example, right? So then nobody would kind of like question the legitimization of space exploration, because I mean, as you said, there's like so much discussion around why would the taxpayers fund money for space exploration since there are so many other problems on Earth, right? But it's just like there's like also always discussion around it. But if it is being democratized, anybody can decide about it.
Yeah, and here's the thing: if space is other than music, my belief is space is the most ubiquitously loved thing and passionate thing among mankind in the world. I mean, have you ever met someone who are like, "Hey, what's your opinion on space?" They're like, "Fuck space." Like you don't run into that. My thing is if you open up those floodgates and you say, "Hey, for the first time ever, even if you got $100, you can invest into space and help push space forward." I think that marketing value by itself is massive. And, you know, you're around crypto, you understand how that dynamic looks. I mean, there's absolute crap that is getting hundreds of millions of capital put into it. If you were to provide a regulated, you know, secure platform, you said, "Hey, John Smith, here's space for you," and you did the marketing right, I think that would really, you know, I think we would have a bigger issue of finding enough space companies at a certain point, right? Because I think the interest would just be so big. So to your valid point around NASA is, you know, let the public, you know, fuel that stuff. If NASA has a budget shortfall, let them go to the American public, because in the 60s and 70s, a lot of people don't know this, the American public used to mail in envelopes of cash to NASA. NASA didn't know what the hell to do with it. But that emotional connection mixed with the capital still exists. And if you can add an incentive layer, or if you can gamify it by giving them NFTs that they can then use for, let's say, you give 20,000 to NASA, you get an NFT and you can go to a rocket launch one day if you're an American citizen. Right? Like let's start really putting that stuff out there. But then there's going to be utility tokens and security tokens. So we're going to go through the whole regulated process. This probably won't be in one swing, right? It'll be a few steps. But the space pool is the first thing that the liquidity pool and the space pool for the contracted space companies. That's the one that we're looking forward to launching within about 6 months or so, once we get through the regulatory part.
Well, that's really exciting. And the last question: how do you see the space economy trends for the end of this year and the next year, specifically with all these like space kind of like tourism race that is actually happening, Blue Origin, SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, and so forth?
There's a lot of positive stuff going on in the direction that I'm talking about. So I brought up the Space Force thing, doing their own FTs and trying to sell these alternative space assets. Space DoD came out today and said they want to open up a marketplace for satellite data. So I think you're going to see the beginning stages of space entering e-commerce.
Right.
2021, 2022 are going to be these first seeds planted for that, and we hope to be the coconut tree out of all this. That's one thing I see. Another aspect I do see is you're going to see the minds opening up around financing of space. So I'm sure you've probably met Aaron and Brent over at Space Ventures. So they're going to be doing crowdfunding. Right. So you're going to start seeing equity crowdfunding models. I speak to a space company probably every day, right? This new space companies, what I call these middle tier providers. So they're not the big satellite companies generating all the raw data. They're not Boeing. There are these hundreds at what is this point almost, I think, 2,000 or so companies in the middle here. They're newer, they're younger. They don't have a $500 million contract with the US government to make them lazy and not want to change the game. That's what I meant earlier by like all these fat cats. Like if you got a $500 million contract, why would you want to change anything in the ecosystem?
Of course.
Right. But these guys are aggressive. So I have like an 8 out of 10 hit rate among early commitment to be a part of Copernic Space with these companies. Right. And they also understand that there's a whole new user base that's coming. So to answer your question again, it's the realization of the new space market, which is agriculture companies, logistics companies, insurance companies, hedge funds, all those guys. There's a certain kind of disconnect right now. But if a platform like ours comes in and starts standardizing some things and that connection is made, to the point you made earlier, people don't understand that, for example, the most green way to invest your money would be in space technology, right? If you want to battle climate change, all these problems on Earth, the best solution for a lot of them is through space ventures and space technology, just like we're showing with the satellite rhino thing, how to best fight, poachers and protecting endangered animals, get as best and live of satellite imagery and data possible for these guys to limit it, right? So I think over the next year, we're going to start seeing some real use cases around that, and we hope to represent a lot of them.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much. Is there any recap, any further comment before we say goodbye?
Oh God, there's so much around this. My thing is to anybody who's listening who wants to be in the space industry or but wants to be entrepreneurial in it, but isn't sure how, is like, I'm not a STEM guy. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a scientist. This economy that's about to be built is the only infinite market in the history of mankind. And with that will come the needs, talents, and services and products for everything you could think of. If you're a PR person, great time to get into it. So my thing is to push the space economy and the people within it forward, provide them better or alternative tools, models, and solutions. So anybody who's listening and was interested in anything I said or wants to learn more, please follow us at Copernic Space or just contact us directly. I try to reach out individually to every single contact we get.
Great. Thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.